Anthony Slater, God, we were on with you yesterday. Thanks for diving on back with us with all this breaking news. We really appreciate your time. Slater, we're stunned. How are you?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, my day's been a little bit crazy ever since the Warriors basically canceled their, introductory press conference or whatever you want to call it, reintroduction. It seemed a little off today at practice, I'll say that. And, now you know why.
Okay, let's cut to the chase here. As a practical matter, based on what we know, which is that Payton flunked his physical and now he's going back for additional x-rays tonight, what is the Warriors' list of options here? We know they can, negate the entire trade. They can accept the entire trade. But then there's this sort of nebulous third option that you and Shams referred to, that they could consider amendments to the trade. How exactly would that work?
We're trying to kind of figure that out. It's a little bit complicated with the 14 deal. There's a chance that they just can't. I know that's very league office related, and you got to get 4 teams back in the room. And, some of these teams didn't deal with Portland at all. Like, Portland was very much like the fourth leg of this deal. So I'm not sure that that's even going to be on the table. And I'm not reporting that it isn't. I think everything is very much up in the air and being figured out at a lot of high levels tonight. But, theoretically, if an amendment was allowed, yeah, sure. It just seems like, you could just take – the Warriors only dealt with Portland. So you could just kind of reflip that part of the deal. But, when something's done at the deadline and it's roped into a 4-team deal, it's kind of either happening or it's not. So I think it needs to be decided if it's going to happen or if it's not going to happen.
Slater, what's the level of anger here on Bob Myers or Joe Lacob? Are they personally offended by this?
Yeah, the Warriors have been pretty upset today about the situation, the negotiations with Portland, and just, I guess, how this all went down. And, obviously we had some of the details in our story, and they're trying to figure out, kind of what their path forward is. But they made this deal because they wanted a win-now player, and their win-now player cannot play now, and they did not know that before they made the deal.
To what level does Gary Payton II have any responsibility to disclose what he needs to get through a game? If he had been more upfront with the Warriors, would that have changed things?
Well, that's the problem. Like, Gary Payton's not part of the negotiations. He doesn't know he's getting traded. But James Wiseman's not in the negotiating table talking to the Pistons. Players are just called and said, hey, we made a deal. Gary Payton's called yesterday and said, you're going to the Warriors. So the deal's already done by the time he's notified. So he is up front. He comes and takes a physical and then tells them what he's been going through. But the trade had already been agreed by the time he could do that.
From what you've been able to piece together with Shams, is the greatest likelihood that the Warriors found out about at least the shots that Payton was getting from Payton himself after the deal was sort of tentatively agreed to?
I don't have that, these are obviously very delicate pieces of information. So I don't know. I don't know exactly, when and how and who relayed exactly what piece of information. But I can just say it came out after the trade. I will say that this was a known injury where he got ab surgery in the summer. They initially said his timeline was he was maybe going to be back for the regular season opener. He was unable to do that. He's mentioned that he had setbacks. He ends up missing 35 games all the way through Christmas. And in his post-game press conference the day after he got back, he's mentioning that it basically saying, I'm paraphrasing, but it's not going to be right the rest of the regular season. He's just going to kind of have to play through it. So there were hints that stuff was going on, but not necessarily it doesn't seem in the negotiations, the details of it to exactly what length.
Anthony Slater joining us to talk about the fact that Gary Payton trade may get scuttled after it's revealed that Gary Payton still has a core injury that would sideline him for 3 months, according to the Warriors doctors. Joe Cronin, the general manager of the Portland Trailblazers, is saying, hey, we had a healthy player. We deemed him healthy to play, and he was playing. How can two medical staffs speak and see the same injury through two completely different prisms?
They're different people, different staff, different thresholds, I guess you would say. Rick Celebrini is noted to be not even just careful, but thorough, with his players. We've seen that over the last couple of seasons. So, From my understanding, that they don't believe this is an injury, he should be playing through, and that there needs to be some type of, rehab process that puts him in jeopardy to miss the season. Why there was a difference in opinion between Portland and the Warriors, I wasn't necessarily in the rooms, or certainly in Portland's room, to know why they decided to have him play through it. But, that is what could possibly blow up one of the biggest deals at the deadline.
If we wanted to go ahead and just be really, on the surface of what it would be. So this whole thing began with the trade of James Wiseman. John Hollinger a couple of days ago talked about how that could be done in the name of cap relief alone. To scuttle this deal, it essentially then cost the Warriors $130 million in the money that they're now not saving because James Wiseman is back on the roster. Would the Warriors really pay $130 million to undo this?
Well, it wouldn't be 130. They saved with this deal, basically you could say $37 million is right around the projection, $7 million this season, $30 next season, because, you have to add salary to get off James Wiseman. They initially added basically Sadiq Bey and Kevin Knox's money. That has turned into Bey to Atlanta, Knox to Portland, and that salary becomes Payton. Now, Payton's salary is lowered enough that it does, like I said, save $37 million, but not $130 million. You would have had to get off Wiseman and not bring anything back for that kind of thing.
Right. Okay. So would they be willing to pay $30 million, whatever the money that they might have saved? Is that now something Joe Lacob would be willing to eat to undo this?
We'll see. I believe tomorrow at noon. Don't quote me on that, but I think it might be noon is the deadline to decide if this is happening or not. And I think that's one of the factors at play. Another one is, walking James Wiseman back in the room. James Wiseman's in Detroit today. He has his GM doing a press conference talking about how happy they are to be there and how great this is for James Wiseman's career. He's going to play a bunch with Detroit. And, Dwayne Casey did a press conference talking about how Steve Kerr had relayed to him, that he's going to be great to coach. Like, it's going to be pretty awkward to walk him back in the room, not to mention Sadiq Bey has to walk back to Detroit potentially, and obviously Payton to Portland. Like, there's a lot of things that would make really undoing this deal pretty awkward.
One other question that I have, I don't know that if you've had time to look up any precedents for this, because I'm sure there have been some. Traditionally, what would be the league's role here in terms of potential punishment for the Blazers? Would it simply be a fine, or are there other options like you lose a draft choice? What are the parameters here that we're talking about?
I don't really know, to be honest. I mean, this is obviously somewhat, I don't know, maybe it's not unprecedented, but it's a difference in opinion. I think a lot of these, fuller details are still being fleshed out. I mean, it's obviously something the league will get involved in, and I would assume and needs to, but I don't know, if punishment necessarily comes or doesn't come. We're just still so early in this process.
How is your wife feeling about you losing your Friday night?
Not great, but, it is what it is. That's the job.
So I just want to come back to James Wiseman possibly returning. I mean, how would that even happen? How could that even happen at this point? Like, I really do think that they're going to go ahead and go through with this deal no matter what, because that is just at a point of no return. Again, all three general managers, Bob Myers the only one, have already commented publicly on all of this happening. James Wiseman, just feels, an element of done wrong by the Warriors? I don't know. I mean, we're at a point of no return with him, aren't we?
I mean, if they decide that their best course of action is to rescind the deal, like I said, we discussed it would be awkward, but sports is sports. You get paid what you get paid. I mean, it could happen. It's post-deadline, so there would be an awkwardness to it, but if it has to happen, it has to happen. I mean, that's the NBA, really.
It's stunning, to say the least. Slater, you got anything else, Ray?
No.
Have we got anything else?
I think
Lucas,
you should go.
Is there anything we need to examine with Anthony before we let him go? Is there any element that we've missed?
I think we got about everything we can. It sounds like everything is still up in the air, and Anthony kind of told us everything he knows, and, there's still a lot to be learned by everybody at this point.
Now, I think we should let him go back and get yelled at some more by his wife.
Thank you, brother. Really appreciate you double dipping with us.
All right, fellas.
Anthony Slater, sharing what he can, giving us what he knows.